Hi, this is Dan Weiss. I am writer and executive producer of Game of Thrones.
And David Benioff, writer, executive producer of Game of Thrones. Dan, you speak with a screechy voice on this one, so...
I'll do the Tyson accent.
Oh, that was dangerous. Mike Tyson hates you now.
Oh, man. Sitting here, we're in separate locations. I'm in LA and David's in New York, so we're each alone in a booth like Robert Evans.
Someone pointed out to us a few weeks ago that some of the sigils had been erroneously assigned in previous episodes, and who was it who got the wrong one? Joffrey got a wolf or
Joffrey
something?
was a Stark.
Yeah. There was no symbolism intended there. Not by me.
No.
We've already talked about this credit sequence 3 times, right? So there's really...
I do. I still enjoy watching it, though.
It is beautiful.
I've probably seen this credit sequence more times than I've seen any 2 minutes of film footage in the history of film.
How do you get to be a genius at creating something like this and be David Fincher's editor? It's a weird confluence of talents for Angus.
Got a weird brain.
Angus has a weird big brain.
Mm-hmm.
I love that shot, that moon shot over the
Yeah.
orb. What do they call it?
The Astrolab.
Astrolab, thank you.
Astrolab.
Nata.
Yes. David's 2 episodes are both just such fantastic pieces of work. He's just such a joy to work with. I mean, he's one of those people that completely transforms the mood on a set. Not that the mood on the set was negative in any way, but he just brings everybody's game up and makes everybody so happy to come to work every day.
The giant must have took him.
I always like this scene because I feel like Theon's been frustrated for a long time. He's really had a lot of animosity, especially towards this guy, Black Lauren, and he hasn't really had a chance to lash out at anyone for a while. And finally he does.
Gone.
I feel like in David's episodes, Alfie really steps up his game, and he was such an amazing surprise out of the gate. Such a commanding and complex presence in these 2 episodes is really where he kicks into gear. Literally. What he did there with his hand when he hit Black Lauren and hurt his hand, I thought was very well played.
Get the horses and the hounds.
And Ralph Ineson deserves a definite mention as an excellent addition to the show. Also played Finchy on the UK version of The Office.
Alfie is a phenomenal actor, and there's no better Theon in the world. He's not the greatest horse rider in the world. A little bit of trivia for you. Alfie Allen.
Getting better, though. He's
Getting better. Yeah.
If you look at
the original pilot. Yeah, the original pilot.
footage. He was on a horse named Hendrix, a big white horse that was very skittish because there was a lot of wind that day, and you've never seen somebody looking more terrified than Alfie looked that day.
That was a brutal day. It was him and Richard Madden and Kit Harington all on horses for a trot and talk.
Robb will have sent a force to retake Winterfell by now.
Robb's in the Riverlands. My sister's in Deepwood Mott. She'll get here long before they do. And Ned Stark always said...
Oh, Donald Sumter. We'll miss you, Donald.
10,000.
Our dire wolves, courtesy of Rainer Gambos and Steve Callback.
Yep, got real wolves this season. After using Northern Inuits for first season, which were great-looking little pups, but they don't really grow up to look like wolves. They grow up to look like wolfish dogs. There's just something different.
Interesting piece of trivia about the wolves: when you're scaling them up, as we are, to make them look bigger than normal-sized wolves, you actually need to slow them down a bit, because when you play a normal-sized wolf at normal speed, scaled up, it looks like it's running in fast motion, like kind of a little Benny Hill vibe to the wolf there. So they need to be incrementally slowed down.
They'll give us some food. We can't risk it. If Theon tracks us here, he'll torture them.
We just missed my favorite Hodor moment of the season.
Yeah. The double Hodor.
The double Hodor.
It's a rare double Hodor.
Season 3, though, he gets it's a monologue. There's actually a Season 3, Episode 9, Hodor goes off.
Entitled Hodor.
Rose Leslie, we were watching Downton Abbey, not together. We don't do everything together, but both of us separately, watching Downton Abbey, and saw Rose in a small part as a maid, small but memorable part, and I think both of us independently thought, God, she'd be a really good Ygritte. And then we brought her in to read, and she turns out to be a really good Ygritte.
What's the matter?
I couldn't imagine a better person for this role than Rose. She and Kit just have such a great funny girl, straight man rapport.
Why is the first time?
Trivia, Rose Leslie, probably the only person in the Game of Thrones cast who actually grew up in a castle.
True. What's the name of the castle? Muckety Ming? Muckety Moo?
I always call it Muckety Moo, but that's not really it. Yeah, I don't remember.
Begins with an M.
A Scottish castle.
Yeah.
And yet she plays a great wildling. That's
Don't call them that.
testament to her talent. Yeah, the two of them are just so good together. And it's such a, you never really know. You cast an actor and actress, you don't know how they're going to be opposite someone else. And the whole, the key to this role really is the chemistry between Jon Snow and Ygritte, and just watching them together. I mean, I could have a whole episode just with these two.
And just the way that they strike that balance between antagonism and attraction. It came to it right out of the gate. There wasn't a false step. It was really a lot of fun to watch, especially when you have 4 hours to shoot every day. It's always fun to watch people hit it right out of the gate with 4 hours to shoot.
That is a giant solid block of ice they're walking by right now. That's not set. That's real ice. Some of the Icelandic guys were picking out little blocks of ice with their ice picks or whatever and bringing them back to the hotel for drinks after shooting, because it's 10,000-year-old glacier ice. And I guess that makes for a special gin and tonic.
You think you're better than me, Crow?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. One of the worries here was that looking at these backdrops, that so many of them were going to look like visual effects add-ins and matte paintings, and there are very, very few visual effects in the Iceland sequences. It's almost all, say 95% real Iceland landscape.
Yeah, absolutely, except for a couple of deep background mountains that you probably wouldn't notice.
Those crazy neon blues that you see jumping out at you, that's what it looks like out on that glacier. It's an awe-inspiring place to be.
It's probably a good time to give a shout out to our DP on this episode and several of the episodes for this season, Martin Kenzie.
Yes.
Who did such an amazing job, looking so beautiful on such an insane schedule. As Dan just mentioned, we had about 5 hours of shooting time every day in Iceland because we're shooting in Iceland in December. And he somehow not just got every shot we needed, but made them all little paintings.
Over the course of his episodes, you look at the sheer range and quality of his work. I mean, he captures so many different environments and so many different looks, and they're all unique and they're all specific, and he just, hats off to Martin. He did a fabulous job.
On top of that, one of the nicest people in the world to work with.
Easily one of the nicest people. Son's a nuclear physicist. Shout out to him, too. Just shout out to everybody. Love this shot.
Man tried to kill me. I want his name and I want his
I like
head.
his proper grammar there. A lot of people would have said, I don't care if you hung 100, but not Tywin Lannister. Knows how to speak.
Feels like it's a hallmark of the upper classes in this world, is that they're always correct, always either speaking correctly or correcting other people who speak incorrectly.
Stannis Baratheon, Tywin Lannister.
That's how you know you've made it in Westeros, when you can
Tyrion Lannister.
become a grammar Nazi.
I always thought you had a talent for violence. Burn the villages, burn the farms. Let them know what it means to choose the wrong side. Is that mutton?
Yes, my lord.
Never get tired of watching these two together.
Talk about chemistry. God.
I'll bring
Great.
something else.
Leave it. You hungry?
No?
Of course you are.
Probably said this in the last. Did we say in the last commentary? We didn't actually have the one that we did. We didn't have any Maisie.
Until the last shot.
Till
of
the last
episode,
shot.
yeah.
She's really. I mean, she was so fabulous in the first season, but in this season, she really took it to a whole new level. I mean, she's just such a weight and subtlety, but humor, and she does so much with so little, and has really gotten a sense of how to work and front of a camera. I mean, it's really just, it was such a joy to watch her work this year.
Yeah, I think her and Sophie are just two of the great young actresses I've ever seen. I mean, we got so lucky that we got both of them. Thank you for cutting her hair, Maisie, because
Yeah, it was a
I
scary.
know you didn't really want to, but it looks really good.
She makes sacrifices for this show.
And Charles Dance, how many people could pull off a leather ensemble like that and, you know, not look like Michael Jackson from Thriller era? I mean, he's a badass.
You know what legacy means?
Charles is
It's what you pass down to
another
your
person we're very lucky to have.
and your children's children.
Charles is the kind of actor who never gives you a bad take and always makes every scene better than it was on page.
Harold the Black thought this castle would be his legacy.
I feel like he scares some people. He's a very nice guy. There's just something very commanding about his demeanor that I think some people find intimidating if they don't know him.
It's appropriate for Tywin Lannister.
35, can you imagine? Look at it now. A blasted ruin. Do you know what happened?
Dragons?
Yes. Dragons happened.
It's fun watching Maisie play this moment coming up where she's just probably smart enough to know better and know that she should be keeping her mouth shut, but she can't help herself and lets her enthusiasm run away with her. Ends up tipping her hand a bit to this guy who's probably smart enough to have figured out 90% of what her deal is already.
Alive within these walls. Aegon Targaryen changed the rules. That's why every child alive still knows his name, 300 years after his death.
Aegon and his sisters.
Don't forget the sisters, Tywin.
It wasn't just Aegon riding his dragon.
Sexist pig.
Dark Sister. Somebody suggested naming a all-girl goth band Dark Sister.
That's a good name for a Valyrian steel sword. A lot better than ice, really.
Most girls are idiots.
You remind me of my daughter. Where did you learn all this stuff about Visenya and her Valyrian steel sword?
From my father.
He's a well-read stonemason. Can't say I've ever met a literate stonemason.
Another thing about David Nutter is that he works very, very quickly. Kit and some other actors Kit was saying in Iceland that he was shooting in Iceland with David with 4 hours a day was leading him inadvertently to kick smoking, because every time he would sit down and spark up a cigarette, he would get called up off his rock to do another take or to do another setup. And he just keeps things flowing at a pace that injects an energy into the whole process that kind of trickles from all the way through, top on down. Everybody feels it.
Do it properly.
My mother served Lady Dustin for many years.
Yeah, he's a guy who's one of the sweetest, gentlest people when not on set, and then on set, not that he becomes mean in any way, because he's always incredibly kind, but the energy level, he never sits. I mean, I've never seen a director work at that pace and just never sits, always standing by the camera. Just keeps the level of intensity up, and at the same time, the crew loves working with him.
Says he won't eat anything that's not in a cup.
These two are both about 7 feet tall. People don't realize that Sophie's is actually 6'9".
It is a good thing that Rory is as tall as he is, because Sophie and Maisie came in. Sophie was always taller, but they came in to the show at very similar heights, and a year later, Sophie was a foot taller than Maisie.
They came in at similar heights?
No, she was always taller, but Sophie must have grown a foot in the first year of the show.
It's a good thing they're not in scenes together anymore, because it would be very difficult to shoot.
Yeah. Luckily, she's playing against Rory here, who's also...
Yeah, he's a genuinely massive fellow.
Speaking of height discrepancies.
A lot of really large people on this show.
Yeah.
My word is worth nothing.
Every now and then you fall in love with a featured extra, because you realize that so often you're cutting shots because someone in the background doesn't look right. And this guy we're about to see at the top of the stairs, local Croatian serving as a Dothraki bodyguard. What a great
There he
face.
is.
I love this guy.
And he's a good performer. He actually had
Yeah.
he had to play comedy. I think he was in episode 5, was it?
Yeah, with Kavaro and
With,
the
with
peacocks.
Steven, and he did a very, very nice job of
Yep.
doing a deadpan comedy.
You think we're savages because we don't live in
This is a
stone
beautiful
castles.
location.
Yeah, incredible. There's a close-up coming up here that gets this, isn't it? There's a close-up coming up that's one of the great close-ups we've ever had on the series. Which is astounding because it's on Kit, and despite his hideous face, it somehow works.
Makes even Kit Harington look beautiful. Iceland.
He was a crow, same as you. But he wanted to be free. Or you could be free too. You don't need to live your whole life taking
That's the upside of 4.5 hours of daylight is
It's
that
all
half your
magic
day
hour.
is magic hour. Yeah.
I could show you the streams to fish.
Normally would have taken like 4 days of shooting across dusk to get these shots, but
I've got to say, it was about the most fun 3 weeks of production because it was incredibly intense on set. You're racing to get all the shots that you need with so little time, but then you're finished at about 4 because the sun's going down. And we're in the middle of nowhere in Iceland, about 6 hours from Reykjavik, and everyone goes back to the hotel and starts drinking because there's nothing else to do.
yeah. Everyone's in the same little sort of tiny hotel. You've taken every room in this hotel, and there's a little restaurant in the hotel, and there's a little bar in the hotel, and it was a good time.
Beautiful little cue from Ramin here.
Yeah, talking about working quickly and working well as somebody who's just turned out such a consistently excellent body of work over the run of both seasons. Ramin Djawadi.
Carl Davies, who's only in, 3 episodes, but has a crucial scene
Yeah.
coming up.
Makes his mark.
He does indeed. John Stahl, a phenomenal Lord Karstark. Looks like an Old Testament prophet.
He was one of those people who you cast the role and cast the best person for the role, and sort of after the fact realized how lucky you were that you got someone as good as John is, because it actually is a much more central role, both in this season and going forward, than you might have given it credit for at first glance.
Your Grace, a minute of your time.
Roose Bolton's romance with Robb Stark always being interrupted by this woman.
I've been treating your wounded men.
And my enemies, as some of my bannermen are fond of mentioning.
They are not my enemies.
That's what I tell my bannermen.
Richard Madden, the best dressed man in Scotland.
Already run through the
Not
supplies
anymore.
I brought with me.
His title was taken from him?
He's been dethroned.
Oh, no.
I don't remember by who.
Oil of roses.
Well, he can still pull off a fur, which
Maybe Alan Cumming. Who knows?
I thought Alan Cumming had
might
his
have-
title
yeah,
taken
yeah.
by Richard Madden.
Maybe Richard took it from him.
Willow bark.
Maybe it's Rory.
Just like an amputated foot without any. I assume there will be more loss of limb before this war is
I
over.
personally like Rory's fashion aesthetic.
It's a lot closer to mine.
Yeah, I was going to say
than Richard's is.
I would do a lot better with Rory's wardrobe than with Richard's.
I believe Rory lived in a cave for a few months, didn't he?
Yeah, he lived. It was in Iceland for a long time too. I think he lived in his car in Iceland for a
Right
while.
into the crag to negotiate a surrender.
Yes.
The crag will have a Meister.
Una Chaplin probably never lived in her car in Iceland.
Expect he will.
If I could write a list.
Come with me to the crag.
Still a fantastic actress for all that. Start seeing Theon really reach the end of his rope in this scene. Get pulled back at the last minute by some good news.
I'm looking at spending the rest of my life being treated like a fool and a eunuch by my own people. Ask yourself, is there anything I wouldn't do to stop that from happening? The hounds will find the scent again. I'll beat them until they do. I'll whip every man here until I have both those boys in hand. And once I've got them, the pampered little shits. Better to be cruel than weak.
Prince Theon! Where are they? Who, my lord? The Stark boys, where are they?
I liked the farmer a lot when he showed up in a previous episode at the feast hall in Winterfell, asking Bran for some help at his farm, and Bran gave him 2 orphan boys and realized we could bring him back and actually make a connect with the boys that were granted to him, being the 2 orphan boys who figure prominently to the plot line here.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to him and to the Croatian extra, it's interesting how much of a show happens with the smaller roles, and how much of the reality of a world lives and dies with the quality of the people who are doing small but memorable roles, like the farmer.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even a small role can really throw off the episode if it's not handled right. And we're lucky, I think, working in Northern Ireland particularly, there's just such a great pool of actors, both in the North and the Republic, to draw from, and even, one-line roles.
She came back.
As soon as I heard. Do you know anything?
Aria's dead.
I know. She was a good...
She's dead. She died alone. She died for me, and I couldn't protect her.
Doria?
We can't find her.
Daenerys doesn't have much left at this point.
She must be dead too. I led my
Poor Jorah's been wearing the same shirt since the pilot, hasn't he?
Yeah, you'd have to get my new costume
He's
next year.
getting a little sweaty.
You went to find me a ship.
My place is by your side.
It's hot in the Red Waste, too.
Alone with these people.
Pray for my return. They'll wave dragons.
Emilia in Croatia was lucky enough to get the best of both worlds, where she could be doing the show and be Daenerys Targaryen, and then take the wig off and walk around the streets of Dubrovnik almost unnoticed. She did have one group of guys who recognized her and started yelling Khaleesi across the main street of the old town in Dubrovnik, and ran and got all of their friends and had a big photo session with the Khaleesi. But it doesn't happen as often as it would with most people like her, just because she doesn't walk around with silver hair.
Forgive me, Khaleesi.
No, the one who's worst hit by it is Peter. We were with Peter in San Diego for Comic-Con, summer of 2011, and he was going to go across the street to the convention hall to, check out the comics being sold and all, and our hotel was literally right across the street from the convention hall, and he took about 5 steps out the door and was immediately mobbed and signed a few autographs, was very gracious, and turned around and went right back into the hotel. I mean, he can't move there. It's like, I don't know what the equivalent is.
He's like
William Shatner at a Trekkie.
I was going to say John Lennon. I was going to give him
That's better.
I was going to give him that credit.
You were going to compare him to a dead guy. That's nice.
This day was a continuity nightmare, because it was snowing, and then it was dry and sunny, and then it was raining, and then it was snowing, and I believe there might be, I don't remember the number, 30, 40, 50 visual effects shots in this sequence that you would never notice, not meant to notice, but they're just snow, rain equalization to make it sure it's consistent from shot to shot.
Yeah, it went from snowing to raining to nothing, back to snowing, I think, all in a matter of about an hour.
We had to change that line, because there's a line he says when she proposes that they may as well get down to it and do it. And he says, what, right here on the ice? And then it changed to in the muck, and then it changed to in the snow. We did about 4 different versions of the line, because we weren't sure which look we were going to end up with.
It's a pretty dangerous shooting environment. You wander off a few 50 yards or so to try to take a pee, and someone comes running over to tell you you're about to fall into a crevasse.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't pee. Sit there and take it. I think everyone in the world wanted to know that.
That's important.
It's crucial. This is what you think about when you're on set.
And that's what I think about always. That's what I'm thinking about right now. Deft maneuver coming up here. Courtesy of the stunt team.
I think of everything she said, being called dull was the one that really hurt the most.
remember this ice bowl that he's about to climb into was one of the most memorable spots I remember standing in Iceland.
You got the whole crew standing around wearing crampons, with really like 2-inch long metal spikes, because otherwise you're gonna slip and fall and break your neck.
Should have took me while you had the chance.
Should be remarked that the idea for this dream sequence lead into her menstruation was Vanessa Taylor's idea. It doesn't happen in the books.
All you really have to say is I can have Joffrey's children now, and everyone realizes what a hell you've just walked into.
It's funny, I think about the first thing that when Sansa in the pilot of the first season, when she meets the queen and Cersei asks her in the middle of this feast, "I'll have you bled yet?" And it's such an uncomfortable moment, and was really the most important question hanging over her character's head throughout the entire 2 seasons, and now it's come to fruition.
Your mother might have prepared you. You flowered, my dear, no more.
My mother told me, but I thought it would be different.
In what way?
These two together are just such a powerful duo through the whole season, especially in this episode and in the 9th episode.
Joffrey's always been difficult.
There are anti-Sansa people out there. I don't get that one. I think she's such a great character, and because she's, not as plucky and heroic as Arya, I think she gets the short end of the stick from some readers and viewers and all. But I think she's so, A, she's so believable, and B, she's just she's a teenage girl, and she's in the worst possible situation. And I just love the way Sophie's played her. And so to all you Sansa haters out there,
suck it. Yeah, I think Sophie is one of the most naturally gifted young actresses working, and I think that she'll end up winning everybody over with her gifts, because she really is just such an intuitive grasp of what she's doing, and it didn't come from training, because she basically had none.
Joffrey will show you no such devotion.
I mean, to be able to hold your own against someone with Lena's gifts is, for someone who's 15 years old, is saying a lot.
Yeah, it's like Maisie with Charles Dance. It's what these young actors are able to do as well as they do is kind of awe-inspiring. I think about myself at 14.
I try not to think about myself at 14 for any reason.
And what a pathetic spectacle that was.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do. You'll act the fool to make them happy, to keep them safe.
Just love when Lena's Cersei, what she brings, just the mix of loathing and jealousy and a tiny glimmer of understanding that she brings, all swirling around together in every scene she's got with Sansa.
Sophie had to do so many horrible things in this episode, the previous episode, but the thing in the season that really made her most nervous was singing in episode 9, Blackwater.
It's a funny thing, because there was a attempted rape scene, and this was the thing that we were most worried about, understandably, and that by the end of the day got to be almost I don't want to say funny, but when you say horrible things over and over and over again, eventually they lose their punch, whereas getting out there and singing in episode 9 in front of a group of people really took all of her courage to do that. When I had never understood, she's got a very very nice singing voice, but that's her personal demon.
I went to Willem Frey's wedding. You did.
Carl Davies, when he auditioned for this part, he read the first half of the scene and didn't realize until much later that the second half was the end of his character.
Which is kind of the idea, and the concept behind it was that This is one of those ones where people, as it were, in the books. So you know that Jamie has an escape attempt in the book, and we think we're about to see one version of an escape attempt, and we end up seeing a very different version.
They mean well, but young men with big jobs.
There's a little in-joke coming up about Brian. Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, a squire, who actually, there was a squire in the books. This is canonical. There is a Brian with a Y in the books who was a squire, so.
Which I don't think we knew when we wrote the scene, but then after the fact realized.
No, but it's just so perfect.
Realized we had fed into the books.
Brian Cogman, or is he now executive story editor and one of our writers,
Yes.
and started off as our assistant and then just kept getting promoted because he's so good at what he does.
The rake lines in the dirt along the list. Not back then. And to help him.
There's pretty easy metaphor to be drawn between the way a knight like Jaime Lannister occupies the world and the way a famous person or a movie star occupies our world. And he really is sort of the movie star of his world. And this kid's experience with him was one of those experiences that meant so much more to one person than it did to another. And Jaime senses this, and he, as he's sensing this, he senses how he can use this adoration against this poor, hapless cousin of his.
I was awful, complete liability. Until one of the outlaws decided.
You can sense that poor Alton really thinks like he's going to take part in this escape plot with Jaime Lannister, and they're going to be singing songs about this someday.
Which hopefully is what the people watching the scene for the first time think also.
I'd have been useless at anything else.
Be interesting to take a poll of how many people, when people figure out that this kid is not long for this world.
Some men are. That's Stark.
Check Twitter.
I imagine he made an excellent.
It's probably a good way to do it.
Until the end. Me,
See how many OMFGs you get.
My life has left me uniquely unfit for constraint.
Nikolaj's accent just gets better and better. I mean, he's I was talking to some people who were shocked to find out that he was Danish, but he's not only a good English accent, but he's got now a good upper crust English accent.
Stark's a very careful.
At least in my untutored ear. But what do I know?
He's definitely stepped into this role. This season he doesn't have that many episodes, but the episodes he's in, he really takes over.
This was an absolutely miserable night. I mean, pretty much all of Nikolaj's nights on this shoot were miserable because he's chained up in the mud, and it was raining for most of the night, really cold. You know, your typical Northern Irish November night. But never a complaint. At least not to me. Maybe he's complaining to someone else.
Complain to me constantly. The world's dumbest guard here.
It's one of the themes of the season. Is dumb guards.
It'd be very hard to make the show work without some pretty dumb guards. I like that design.
Who travel too close to the doom must have protection.
I didn't come here for less.
I think Paul Englund came up with that designer, hair and makeup
You have them.
department head.
And Michelle Clapton's mask is beautiful too.
Yeah, really nice work.
See what you're
It's a lot more interesting than the default version I had pictured in my head.
Yeah, I think we got an email from George when I first saw it, complimenting Michelle on the design, because it's very different from the way it's described in the book, where I believe it's a wooden, like a lacquered wooden mask, but and it's also kind of echoes the one of the pieces that Melisandre wears, which is interesting because there's a bit of a connection there.
It's always fun when you can to draw little lines between characters who never meet each other and never have anything to do with each other on screen.
Never.
The thief you seek.
Line about will you betray her again is a reference to the fact that Jorah was spying on Daenerys for a long time before he started following her in earnest, and there's no way in hell this woman could have ever known that, so that means she's magic.
Who is she to accuse us?
Please,
They're my children. I'm begging you.
Begging us? It wasn't very long ago you were threatening us.
Without me, the dragons will die.
It will be for the best. Your dragons will bring the world nothing but death and misery, my dear. If I knew where they were, I would not tell you. You are cruel, my friend.
Went for the number of slit throats record this season, and this scene, I think, upped her tally significantly. Probably still losing to Spartacus, though.
Yeah, well, you know, you got to compete in your category.
Those guys know how to cut a throat.
They're out of our weight class. It has to be one of the most beautiful mass throat slittings ever put on film.
I made an arrangement with the king of Karth.
There are places in this scene where Ian, who plays Pied Pre, reminds me of Nicol Williamson's Merlin in Excalibur. They have a similar accent, probably has something to do with it.
Someone online put up a picture of Pied Pre opposite Scream, painting the Munch painting. Actually, it was kind of perfect.
Those on the margins often come to control the center.
Forever.
I like that shot.
I like this shot. He's so confused. Why is she running a gun?
Yeah, you going
she
mad?
doesn't appreciate me.
What's wrong with you?
A mother should be with her children.
Obi-Wan?
Yeah, a little Obi-Wan action.
Where will you run to, Daenerys Stormborn? Your dragons wait for you in the House of the Undying. Come see them.
That's his Merlin moment for me.
Kind of a Nosferatu look there, too.
Yeah.
Lady Stark.
No, Father.
Keep your hands off me, woman.
Don't enter without an invitation, man.
Forgive me. Lady Stark.
It's like, realizes he's overstepped.
This talking about how much we appreciate our background guys and featured extras and everything. I mean, these guys were fantastic. They were so fantastic that Nikolaj was actually pretty banged up by the end of this because a few of these fellas that were actually hitting him, not just play hitting him. And Northern Irish guys know how to hit. So he was a bit bruised by the end of the scene, but it just looks phenomenal. And these guys, look, I'm not the one getting hit, so it's easy for me to say, but I think it was worth it in the long run. I think Nikolaj would agree after he sees it. Because
to Nikolaj's credit, he managed throughout this, like, take after take of actually getting the shit beat out of him, he managed to keep sort of a half smile on his face the whole time.
Who stands between her father and his vengeance?
This is the scene that just makes me really appreciate what an incredible group of background talent that we're able to assemble in Northern Ireland season after season, because in some scenes that, you know, the extras are basically there filling the frame and bodies, but in some scenes they play a key part in making the scene work and making it convincing. And here in the later scenes where we see them at night fighting, I mean, their animosity and their the energy of what they're doing, if it doesn't work, if it's not convincing, the scene just falters. And so this is, our hats are off to our Northern Irish background maestros for this one. And they were really into it. I mean, these guys are you know, spending time between shots talking to each other, like figuring out who's going to be the aggressor, who's going to be getting pushed, but also like figuring out backstories for each other. They all know, you know, like not only which house they belong to, but you know what their stories were before the war started.
I would say at this point, by the time the second season came around, most of our background talent had read the books and had watched the show one way or another, and they were really kind of self-starters on that front.
Growing out their hair, growing their beards.
Yeah. It's a big rock and roll country, Northern Ireland, so that helps. A lot of them they come with the hair already.
You can become a real she-wolf in your later years. There's not much fish left in you. And gag him.
Love Michelle in this scene. She really
Yeah,
comes full knives out in that scene. For whatever reason, every time I hear her deliver that line, I laugh.
Yeah, me too. I mean, she's...
It's a little human detail of, you know, it's like, it's not sympathetic, I wouldn't say, because most of us don't know what that's like, but it just gives you a little window into her psychology.
And the fact that Lena's able to give Cersei, who's a pretty ruthless character, but she's able to find real moments of humor for her. which helps to keep her from becoming too monochromatic. And, you know, like every other Ice Queen we've seen in epic fantasy. I mean, Cersei is a more complicated character, and very lucky we have Lena on board for her.
She just brings so much dimension to her, and there are so many different sides that surface at different places and different scenes. This, I'd say, that moment between the two of them, and it's not even it's a dialogue-free moment at the end of the scene, is one of my very small handful of favorite performance moments in the entire series.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've said it before, but I mean, these two are so close on a personal level, and they actually shared housing together in Belfast the summer this was being shot, or summer and fall, and have known each other for years. And I think Peter actually helped convince Lena to do the show when she was on the fence. But the fact of their closeness, you know, their friendship, I think makes it a lot easier for them to play characters who are normally at each other's throats, because there's just a confidence between them, a trust, and they get the scenes and they read them together off on their own. They're just... Every one of their scenes this season was a showstopper.
I mean, there's between these two characters, there is, even though it's a mostly hateful relationship between these two characters, there's a real intimacy to their relationship. And I think that the fact that their closeness as people off screen, I think, helps them convey that intimacy on screen. Revealing herself to him in a way that she's never revealed herself probably to anybody. And not because she likes him, she doesn't like him at all, but he's the only person who's close enough to her to be a receiver of this information. He has no idea what to do. Also good seeing Tyrion be unable to make things better with his words. That was his attempt. Didn't really work.
It was a pretty good attempt.
He tried.
He deserves credit for coming up with a pretty good...
he tried.
Yeah.
And then you see that, you know...
2 out of 3 ain't bad, is basically what he's saying.
with your children.
It's unfortunate that the one of the 3 happens to be the king.
Those 2 shots for me, I love that moment.
If your one psychopath child was the youngest, it would be fine, because he would have no power.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's Joffrey.
What are you going to do?
The sun returns at dawn, my lady.
So they say.
The Kingslayer won't last the night. The more they drink, the angrier they'll get. And when the Karstarks draw their swords.
Talking about great chemistry pairings. Gwendolyn and Michelle together, just so different. You know, their personalities are so different. Their looks are so different. One's in armor, one's in her cloak. I guess knowing that they don't have that much time together makes it all the sweeter. At a certain point, I think, with the Kingslayer, he'd want to put a roof on his pen.
Yeah.
I need to be alone with him.
Milady, our orders...
Your orders, which I've just gave you, are to leave me alone with him.
It's not Avatar, man.
He can never escape.
Can't afford a roof on that pen.
I believe it's my last night in this world.
How can I get out of this cage?
There was a technical reason we didn't have one, and I'm forgetting what it was. But it was important.
It was a lighting camera issue.
Talk about convincing arguments. I think the Kingslayer makes a pretty good argument here about the hypocrisy of knighthood and the whole chivalric code and all the various oaths you have to take.
Protect the innocent, defend the weak. And what if your father despises the king?
Because he's right. If you're sworn to protect the king and follow the king's orders, and the king's a madman who wants to burn everyone he doesn't like, well, it's a tricky position. More of which comes out in season 3.
He is a truer knight than you will ever be.
I think one of the things that's most fun about George's world is that there are a lot of people who have some very good reasons for doing some very bad things.
Yeah, it makes it much more interesting than just having like a Lord of Darkness who just wants to conquer the world because that's what he does.
I think that everybody who does horrible things has their own really convincing reasons for doing them. Jaime's are probably more convincing than most because he was indeed working for a lunatic.
And good old Ned came home with some horse.
He's a good button pusher. Jamie
Oh
Lannister.
yeah, he knows exactly how to manipulate Catelyn here.
You're not very good at pretending. You're an honest woman. You hated that boy, didn't you? How could you not hate him? The walking, talking reminder.
It's one of the things about Catelyn's character that we always found most interesting from the books and wanted to hit. Was her relationship with Jon Snow, because in so many ways she's such an admirable woman and a very loyal, good wife and mother and strong family person, but she could never get over the fact that her husband came home with this bastard son. And Jaime Lannister didn't spend a whole lot of time in Winterfell, but he's a perceptive fellow, and he knows Catelyn. And as Dan said, figured out exactly how to push her buttons.
It's unfortunately a very funny GIF floating around the internet with a shot of Lewin and Dagmar in here.
In flagrant delicto.
Yeah. I think Alfie's performance here is so crucial in selling this moment.
Yeah, there are two great close-ups of Alfie. Many great ones, but two that I love from the season. This one right here, and then the one right after he chops off Roderick's head.
Yeah. Both David Nutter.
That is a Man Without Honor. Thank you for listening to us babble on.
Thank you, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of the commentary tracks.
Go listen to the Stark Kids, because their commentary tracks are much more entertaining than ours will ever be.
Listen to VFX in 210, because I promised them everybody would listen.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.